The whisper in the palace halls. Imagine walking through the marble corridors of a palace where everything glitters, chandeliers dripping with crystal, floors polished to a mirror's shine, guards standing motionless like statues. But in this world of elegance there's a secret, one so strange, so absurd, that servants can barely hold back their laughter when they gossip in the kitchens at night. The ruler, the most powerful man in the land, has placed his throne directly over a toilet. At first it sounds like a cruel joke made by a court jester, a piece of satire scribbled on parchment to mock the monarch. But this is no jest. It is his reality, his command. Why would a man born to rule, surrounded by silks and gold, make such a choice? The answer lies somewhere between extreme laziness, a fascination with bodily functions, and the hidden royal obsession with never missing a moment to govern. In the late hours, when the palace fell silent except for the occasional echo of distant footsteps, a young servant named Tomas claimed he once brought a tray of sweetmeats to the royal chamber, only to be met with a sight he could never forget. There, in the glow of candlelight, the emperor sat upon his elaborate jewel-encrusted seat, reading state documents, signing decrees, and occasionally, making use of the plumbing beneath him. This was not a crude bucket tucked away in some chamber corner. No, this was a carefully engineered marvel for its time. Pipes descending into hidden channels, perfumed oils masking the less regal odors. The toilet throne was a statement, a declaration that the emperor was above embarrassment, that he could merge the most human of acts with the loftiest of duties. But the court was divided. Some called it ingenious, a symbol of efficiency, ruling without pause. Others whispered that it was a sign of madness, a step too far into eccentricity. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of the emperor's strange habits. The boy who watched too closely. Before the man, there was the boy, and like all boys born to kingship, his childhood was a strange mix of privilege and suffocation. The young prince was surrounded by nurses, tutors, and guards. But unlike other royal children who spent their days chasing falcons or riding ponies, he spent his hours watching the servants sweep floors, watching the stable boys shovel manure, watching the kitchen staff prepare meals from scratch. It wasn't the wealth or the jewels that fascinated him. It was the practical side of life, how waste was carried away, how chamber pots were emptied, how drains gurgled and disappeared into stone passages beneath the castle. His tutors thought him peculiar. Other princes learned swordsmanship. He learned the palace's drainage system. When the royal plumber came to repair a cracked pipe under the bathhouse, the boy insisted on following every step, asking questions in a soft but relentless voice. Where does it all go? How far? How deep? And what if it never left at all? It was in these curious moments that his obsession began. The link between comfort, control, and sanitation planted itself like a seed in his mind, and it would grow into something history would never forget. The hidden library of oddities. Most royal libraries were filled with illuminated manuscripts about history, religion, and the art of war. His, however, was different. Hidden behind a false wall in his private quarters was a narrow, dust-filled room where he kept the books he wasn't supposed to have. Treatises on Roman aqueducts, diagrams of medieval sewer systems, scrolls describing the latrines of ancient palaces from Egypt to China. The boy studied these as if they were sacred texts. He learned how Roman emperors had built marble-seated toilets with running water beneath them. He read of Chinese officials who carried porcelain chamber pots with silk covers. At night, by candlelight, he would draw crude sketches in the margins of his schoolwork. Thrones with hidden holes, fountains with secret drains, banquet tables with discreet waste chutes. His governess once scolded him for doodling nonsense, but the boy was not deterred. In his mind, sanitation was not a trivial matter, it was the foundation of civilization. And one day, when he had the crown, he would prove it. Lessons from the bathhouse. The royal bathhouse was his sanctuary. Here marble tubs were filled with steaming water scented with crushed herbs. Servants poured pitchers of warm milk into the water for the queen's beauty baths. Heated stones kept the air heavy and warm. But the prince wasn't there for luxury. He was there for the mechanics. He learned that beneath the bathhouse was a network of clay pipes leading to a cesspit outside the castle walls. He learned that if you tilted a basin just slightly, the water would drain perfectly without spilling. The bathhouse keeper, an old man missing half his teeth, took a liking to the boy and began teaching him the hidden arts. How to keep water clean, how to prevent foul smells, how to create the perfect seat. When other children played chess, the prince sketched designs for what he called his chair of eternity, a throne that could last forever without the need to leave it for even the basest of needs. The day of the feast. One evening, when the boy was barely 15, the king hosted a grand feast for visiting nobles. The hall was dripping with banners and the smell of roasted meat. Music filled the air. Halfway through the second course, a minor disaster struck. One of the guests excused himself to the privy, a makeshift outhouse just beyond the banquet hall, and never returned. He had slipped on the wet floor and broken his ankle, causing the feast to halt in confusion. The prince watched the chaos unfold and thought, what a waste of time, what a flaw in the system. That night, lying in bed, he whispered to himself, it could all be in one place. The food, the power, the comfort. The idea of merging the act of ruling with the act of relieving oneself had found its first true spark. The old Romans' influence. Years later, as a young man, he met a visiting scholar from Italy, a wrinkled, sharp-eyed man who had studied the ruins of ancient Rome. Over cups of wine, the scholar told stories of emperors who conducted business from their baths, their beds, and yes, even their toilets. Some Roman latrines were so grand that senators discussed politics while seated side by side, marble under them, flowing water beneath. The young royal's eyes lit up. This wasn't just a private obsession anymore. It had historical precedent. If Rome, the greatest empire in history, could do it, then surely it was the mark of sophistication, not madness. By the end of the night, the two men had sketched a design for what they jokingly called the seat of empire. But for the prince, the joke was already becoming a plan. The throne room transformation. When his father died and the crown passed to him, the new emperor wasted no time. The carpenters, masons, and plumbers were summoned. The royal throne room was closed for renovations. Rumors flew. Perhaps he was adding a golden ceiling, or an army of musicians. But when the doors reopened, the truth was far stranger. The throne itself was now an elaborate seat with hidden plumbing. Gold filigree and velvet cushions concealed a discreet opening beneath. Beneath the floor, pipes carried waste directly into a sealed chamber, where perfumed oils masked the smell before it was disposed of by trusted servants. It was beautiful. It was absurd. It was entirely his. Court life adjusts. At first, the courtiers were horrified. Some refused to meet him in the throne room, insisting on speaking in the antechamber. But over time, they adapted. Petitions were read aloud as the emperor sat in regal comfort. Decrees were signed between sips of wine and quiet muffled sounds from beneath the throne. The emperor insisted that it was the ultimate symbol of efficiency. Why waste a moment? Why separate the duties of the body from the duties of the realm? Soon, foreign dignitaries began to whisper about it. Some called it vulgar. Others called it genius. But all agreed on one thing: it made him unforgettable. The incident with the ambassador. One afternoon, a visiting ambassador from a faraway kingdom knelt to present a treaty. As he did, a faint but unmistakable sound came from the emperor's direction. The ambassador froze. The courtiers froze. The emperor, unbothered, simply continued discussing the terms, as if nothing had happened. The message was clear. In his court, bodily functions were not shameful. They were simply part of life. Later, the ambassador would write in his report, "He sits as if the entire world were his chamber pot." The throne inspectors. Not long after unveiling his improved throne, the emperor appointed two peculiar positions to his court: the royal seat inspector and the keeper of the pipes. The seat inspector was a man of dignified posture, but questionable pride in his work. Every morning before the emperor arrived, he would kneel by the throne with a brass magnifying glass, checking for cracks, wear, or stray debris. The keeper of the pipes, meanwhile, was responsible for maintaining the hidden channels beneath the floor. This was no easy task. The emperor demanded complete silence from the plumbing during court sessions, which meant constant oiling of joints and flushing of bends. While others in the palace measured their worth by military victories or diplomatic wins, these two men measured theirs by the smoothness of the emperor's experience. It is said that the keeper of the pipes once received a gold medallion for fixing a stubborn blockage in under 2 minutes. During a tense treaty discussion with 3 rival kingdoms, the royal perfumes, the throne's design had a flaw, not in the mechanics, but in the air. Even the most discreetly constructed chamber needed a solution for odor. The emperor, ever devoted to refinement, ordered a collection of exotic perfumes from across the known world. From the spice markets of Arabia came frankincense and myrrh. From India arrived sandalwood oil, thick and golden. The emperor's favorite was a blend from the Far East, jasmine mixed with crushed camphor leaves. Every morning, before court began, a servant would drip a few drops into a hidden bronze pan beneath the throne. The heat from a concealed coal kept the scent warm and lingering. Guests swore the throne room always smelled faintly of summer gardens, though few ever guessed the reason. In his private notes, the emperor wrote, "The nose commands the mind. A kingdom should never smell like a cesspit." The council's unease. The emperor's closest advisors were loyal, but even they sometimes struggled to adapt to his new style of rulership. One veteran counselor who had served 3 previous kings confided to a scribe, "I do not know where to look anymore. My eyes wander between his crown and the cushion, and both seem equally important." Another, a humorless tax minister, argued that meetings took too long because the emperor was too comfortable and saw no urgency in concluding them. But the emperor countered, "A mind at ease is a mind that governs wisely," whether they agreed or not. The council eventually fell into the rhythm of his reign, adjusting petitions, discussions, and state matters to the quiet intervals between unseen personal moments. The hidden switch. The throne held one secret even the council did not know. A concealed lever carved into the armrest. When pulled, it triggered a mechanism that released a flush of fresh water from an overhead cistern, sending a quiet rush through the hidden pipes. The emperor had insisted on the feature after hearing of a Roman villa that boasted self-cleansing fountains. He was proud of it, so much so that, on rare occasions, he would discreetly pull the lever during moments of political tension, letting the soft sound of rushing water fill the room. Some courtiers believed it was a subtle intimidation tactic, a way of saying, "I can resolve matters without leaving my seat." The banquet experiment. One summer, the emperor decided to host a banquet unlike any other. Instead of retiring between courses, he remained seated in the throne room while food was brought to him in a steady procession. Roasted swan, honeyed dates, spiced lamb. As musicians played and dancers performed, the emperor carried on conversations with guests, signing documents between bites. It was a display of absolute control. He could feast, entertain, and govern without ever rising. Foreign envoys returned home whispering about the strange monarch who dined and ruled as though fused to his seat, and while some mocked him, others began to wonder if such efficiency was a sign of genius. The spy in the sewers. Not all admired the emperor's innovations. One night a spy crept into the palace's underground channels, hoping to sabotage the throne's system. He believed that blocking the pipes would embarrass the emperor in front of his court. But the keeper of the pipes, ever vigilant, discovered the intruder before dawn. The spy was dragged into the throne room, filthy and dripping. The emperor listened to his confession, then ordered him to clean every inch of the sewer system as punishment. By the end of the month, the pipes gleamed like polished bronze, and the spy had gained a strange sort of fame. Some called him the sewer knight, the throne maker's pride. The man who built the emperor's throne was no ordinary carpenter. His name was Master Varric, and he considered himself less of a craftsman and more of a philosopher of furniture. Varric believed that a seat could influence a man's thoughts. "Give a ruler a hard bench," he once said, "and you will have quick but harsh decisions. Give him comfort, and his mind will flow like water." When the emperor commissioned him, Varric spent 6 months in obsessive work. He traveled to distant forests to select the perfect cedar wood, tested dozens of cushion fillings, and even measured the emperor's posture during meals. When the throne was unveiled, Varric bowed deeply and whispered, "Your Majesty, may this seat hold your body as gently as the people hold your name." The emperor rewarded him not with gold, but with an honorary title, Guardian of the Cushion. The map beneath the seat. Hidden beneath the throne's cushioned seat was something no one suspected, a detailed map of the empire carved into the wood. It was an exact miniature, with rivers, mountains, and even the walls of cities etched with painstaking care. The emperor claimed it was for inspiration, so that every time he sat down, he was quite literally sitting over his entire realm. Foreign dignitaries who learned of the map called it both poetic and unnerving. One remarked, "His rule is so absolute, he rests on our lands as if they were a cushion." Some whispered that the emperor would trace his finger over the carved map during tense meetings, as if reminding himself of the territory he controlled. The day the throne spoke. One autumn morning, the court was stunned when the throne let out a long, low groan in the middle of a serious legal hearing. The sound was deep and resonant, echoing through the hall like a slow drumbeat. The emperor, unfazed, calmly said, "It approves," and continued the session as though nothing had happened. From that day on, courtiers joked about seeking the throne's opinion. Whenever decisions were made, the keeper of the pipes, mortified, spent 3 days tightening every bolt and hinge, swearing it would never happen again. But to the people, the legend of the speaking throne spread quickly, and in taverns, it was said the throne had a voice that only the emperor could hear. the royal cat's privilege. The emperor owned a sleek, black cat named Obsidian. Most animals were forbidden from the throne room, but Obsidian had free rein. The cat would often leap into the emperor's lap during meetings, curling up contentedly while foreign emissaries spoke. Once, during a tense negotiation, the cat jumped onto the armrest and stared down a visiting duke. The man became visibly nervous, fumbling his words. The emperor smiled faintly and stroked the cat's head. Some swore the emperor trained Obsidian to act as a living truth detector, watching how guests reacted to its gaze. Others suspected the cat was simply spoiled beyond belief. Either way, Obsidian became something of a secondary ruler in the eyes of the court. The throne's festival day. Each year, on the anniversary of the throne's construction, the emperor held a peculiar celebration. It began with a ceremonial polishing of the wood, using oils mixed with rare herbs. Courtiers and officials were invited to present gifts to the throne: embroidered cushions, inlaid armrest covers, or finely woven foot rugs. A small feast followed, where the emperor remained seated, raising a goblet of wine to toast both his throne and his people. To outsiders, it seemed absurd. To the emperor, it was a way of honoring the object that had supported him in both body and rule. The audience of shadows. During certain evenings, the emperor would summon only a handful of trusted advisors for what he called the audience of shadows. The throne room would be lit by just 2 oil lamps, casting long flickering shapes on the walls. In the dim light, the emperor claimed that words became truer and decisions clearer. These meetings often stretched late into the night, with only the soft trickle of the throne's water channels breaking the silence. Rumor held that the emperor made some of his most cunning political moves during these shadowed councils. The throne of storms. One day, as the emperor presided over court, a sudden thunderstorm rolled across the city. Rain drummed against the palace roof, and lightning flashed through the tall windows. Yet the emperor sat perfectly still, speaking calmly over the noise. When a massive thunderclap shook the hall, he smiled and said, "Even the heavens bow before this seat." From that day, whenever storms came, the emperor would ensure the throne room remained open for audiences, a demonstration that neither nature nor man could move him from his place. The petition of the farmer. A humble farmer once came to court with a complaint about taxes. He was awed by the throne and blurted out, "If I had a seat like that, I'd never leave it either." The emperor laughed and invited the farmer to sit for a moment. The man hesitated, then slowly lowered himself onto the cushion. Later he told his village that the throne was like sitting on a cloud carved from gold, and that it made a man feel both powerful and oddly polite. The story spread, adding to the mystique of the emperor's seat. The throne under siege. During a brief uprising, rebels stormed the palace gates. The emperor did not flee. Instead, he ordered the throne room doors barred and sat calmly, waiting. When the palace guard defeated the attackers, they found their ruler still in place, crown straight, hand resting on the armrest. He simply said, "Open the doors. Let the court resume." That single act of composure became legend, proof that the emperor ruled with unshakable calm. The pilgrimage of the cushion. In the throne's 10th year, the cushion had worn slightly. Rather than replace it outright, the emperor ordered it to be sent on a ceremonial pilgrimage to the finest artisans in the land. Each added their own craft, a layer of silk here, a stitch of gold thread there, before sending it on. When it returned, the cushion was a patchwork of luxury, a symbol of the entire realm stitched together. The emperor declared, "Now I do not merely sit on a throne, I sit on the work of my people, the throne's keeper of keys." The emperor appointed a single man, Jerim, the Silent, to be the keeper of the throne keys. His duty was to lock and unlock the throne's protective cover each morning and night. The keys were enormous and made of bronze, engraved with winding patterns said to bring good fortune. Jerim spoke to no one about his work, but he was always present at the start and end of every court day, his solemn face lit by the glow of the hall's torches. Children in the city whispered that if you saw Jerim smile, it meant the emperor's reign would last another decade. The Day of Silence. Once a year, the emperor declared a day of silence, during which no one in the throne room, including the emperor himself, could speak aloud. Courtiers and officials would present written notes or simple hand gestures. Decisions were made with nods, frowns, and the occasional raised eyebrow. At first, visitors found it absurd, but by the end of the day, many admitted that it gave the court an almost mystical air, as though the throne itself was listening more than the ruler. The throne and the moon. The throne was positioned so that once every month, during the full moon, a beam of moonlight would fall directly across its backrest. On these nights, the emperor would sit without his crown, dressed in plain white robes, and listened to poets and musicians until dawn. He claimed that the throne felt lighter on those nights, and that decisions made under moonlight were the most merciful ones. The day the cushion was stolen, it happened during a crowded festival. Somehow, in the chaos, the throne's cushion vanished. Panic rippled through the palace. The emperor ordered the gates locked, but it was too late. The thief was gone. For 3 days the emperor sat on the bare wood, refusing all replacement cushions. Then, a traveling merchant arrived with a bundled cloth, claiming he had found it in a roadside ditch. Whether the merchant was the thief or not, no one knew. But the emperor rewarded him handsomely, and from that day on, the cushion was tied to the throne with golden cords. The Emperor's Midnight Council. The emperor had a strange habit of conducting important councils not in the glittering halls of his palace, but in a dim chamber adjoining his personal privy. It was always just past midnight. Courtiers, bleary-eyed and shivering, would be summoned without warning. They would find the ruler lounging on his elevated seat, the infamous porcelain throne of his era, with a small writing desk beside him. By candlelight, he discussed matters of state. The smell, while not overpowering, was unmistakable. Ministers never dared mention it. Some speculated the emperor believed decisions made here were more authentic, free of the pomp and false courtesy that infected daylight meetings. Others whispered that it was a display of power. To force the nobility to stand in such a place was to remind them they were subjects, no matter their titles. The perfume bearers. Not all aspects of this royal toilet court were unpleasant. The emperor employed a dedicated team of perfume bearers. These attendants carried elaborate censers filled with smoldering herbs, sandalwood, cinnamon bark, and even crushed rose petals, to mask any odor. The smoke drifted lazily in the air, mingling oddly with the sounds of running water from a nearby fountain. These bearers were chosen for their silent footsteps and solemn expressions. They were forbidden from speaking while on duty. To the emperor, their presence transformed the privy into something approaching a sacred chamber, a place where scent, sound, and statecraft mixed in a strangely theatrical display. The throne engineer. One man in the imperial court enjoyed more influence than most ministers. The throne engineer. His sole responsibility was to maintain and improve the emperor's elaborate seat. This was no crude wooden box. It was a marvel of its time. It featured a water channel that could be flushed by hand-cranked pumps, a padded seat of imported leather, and an armrest inlaid with tiny gold tiles. The engineer frequently presented innovations: a warmer cushion for winter nights, a footrest carved from marble, even a mechanism to play music when the seat was occupied. In a world where most people relieved themselves in the simplest of ways, the emperor's throne was a technological wonder, and its upkeep a matter of national importance. The ritual hand. The emperor insisted on an elaborate cleansing ritual after each audience. A servant would approach with a silver basin of warm water scented with jasmine oil. The ruler would wash his hands slowly, pausing to inspect his nails, while courtiers waited in respectful silence. A towel of embroidered silk was then presented. To some, this was simply hygiene. To others, it was a symbolic act, as if the emperor were washing away the unworthy petitions and clumsy arguments he had heard. This ritual, repeated countless times, became part of the legend of the toilet court. Foreign envoys often returned home speaking of it in hushed amazement. The ambassador's discomfort. One particularly famous incident involved an ambassador from a distant kingdom, accustomed to lavish receptions in marble halls. He arrived dressed in his finest silks, only to be led into the humid, perfumed chamber beside the privy. His eyes watered as he bowed. The emperor, seated comfortably, invited him to speak. The ambassador stumbled over his prepared speech, distracted by the setting. According to witnesses, the emperor found this hilarious, leaning back and laughing until tears rolled down his cheeks. The message was clear. In this court, the ruler dictated not only the laws, but the very atmosphere in which they were heard. The historian's dilemma. Court historians struggled with how to record these gatherings. The chronicles were supposed to capture the dignity of the realm, yet omitting the privy sessions entirely would erase many key decisions from the record. Some opted for vague phrases. The emperor met with his council in private, while others, braver or perhaps more mischievous, described the events plainly. Over time, these honest accounts became prized curiosities, read centuries later by scholars who could hardly believe the ruler's peculiar methods. Ironically, it was these candid descriptions that helped preserve the memory of the toilet throne far beyond its time. The night of the flood. One stormy evening, a fault in the water system caused the privy chamber to flood. The attendants rushed to contain it, but the ankle-deep water spread quickly. Instead of moving to a drier room, the emperor insisted the council continue. Ministers stood in the chilly water, robes soaked, while the emperor's seat remained safely above the rising pool. It was as if he relished the symbolism, himself untouched, his advisors floundering. The incident became a whispered tale among servants, retold for years as the night the court nearly floated away. The secret scribbles. During long deliberations, the emperor had a habit of doodling on scraps of parchment. These were not idle sketches, but strange diagrams, half maps, half mystical symbols, which he refused to explain. Some believed they were battle plans, others thought they were charms to protect the realm. After his death, a chest of these toilet scribbles was found hidden in the palace archives. Historians still debate their meaning, though many admit the drawings are oddly beautiful. The privy oaths. Swearing loyalty to the emperor was a formal affair for most subjects, but those in his inner circle took their oaths in the privy chamber itself. They would kneel on the cool marble floor, placing one hand on the armrest of the toilet throne, and swear to serve faithfully. The act was strangely intimate, far removed from the public spectacle of a throne room ceremony. Some said this made the oath more binding. After all, in such an unusual setting, every detail was unforgettable. The illness that changed everything. In his later years, the emperor suffered from an illness that confined him to the privy chamber for longer periods. Rather than see this as a weakness, he embraced it, holding nearly all audiences there. The courtiers adapted, bringing documents, maps, and tribute directly to his side. Strangely, this increased his aura of authority. He seemed untouchable, surrounded by the familiar rituals of his private court. For commoners, it became a mark of extraordinary favor to be summoned to the toilet throne, a sign that the emperor considered one's petition too important to delay. The day of silence. One day, without explanation, the emperor ordered an entire session to be conducted in complete silence. No one spoke. Instead, requests and answers were written on wax tablets and passed back and forth. The only sounds were the scratch of styluses and the soft crackle of incense. The meaning of this experiment was never explained, but it left a deep impression on all present. Some thought it a meditation on the emptiness of courtly flattery. Others suspected it was merely the emperor's way of amusing himself. The marble mosaic. The floor of the privy chamber was a masterpiece, a vast marble mosaic depicting waves, fish, and water birds. Few visitors noticed the artistry at first, distracted as they were by the setting, but those who did found it mesmerizing. The emperor claimed it was meant to honor the element that carries away all burdens. Whether this was sincere or another example of his dry humor is unclear, but the mosaic survived long after the rest of the chamber fell into ruin. The test of patience. Sometimes the emperor kept his guests waiting just outside the privy chamber for hours. It was a subtle test. Those who fidgeted or complained were marked as impatient and untrustworthy. Those who waited calmly, even cheerfully, earned his respect. This silent vetting process shaped the court in ways no one fully realized until much later. It was not the most comfortable form of political assessment, but it was effective. The poet's recital. A visiting poet once offered to recite verses for the emperor. To his surprise, the ruler agreed, but only if the performance took place in the privy chamber. The poet, undaunted, delivered an epic about rivers and storms, his voice echoing strangely in the tiled room. The emperor was so moved that he granted the poet a purse of gold and ordered his works copied in the royal scriptorium. For years afterward, poets sought the same honor, believing the unusual setting might inspire their finest work. The lamp of amber, glass. At night, the privy chamber was lit by a single lamp of amber-colored glass. The light it cast was warm and soft, transforming the space into something almost tranquil. Shadows danced across the walls as the emperor spoke, making the whole scene dreamlike. Foreign visitors later described it as one of the strangest yet most beautiful rooms they had ever seen. The lamp itself became a symbol of the emperor's reign, depicted in tapestries and coins. The emperor's pet heron. In his later years, the emperor kept a tame heron in the privy chamber. The bird wandered freely, occasionally letting out a sharp cry that startled new visitors. It was said the emperor believed the heron brought luck, as it stood by silently during important decisions. Some suspected he simply enjoyed the companionship. The heron outlived him by several years, and its taxidermied form was placed in the Royal Museum as a relic of the peculiar court. The strange clock. Time in the privy chamber was measured not by an hourglass, but by a peculiar water clock. A steady drip filled a glass vessel, and when it overflowed, the session was over. The device was beautiful, carved from ivory and brass, but it also had a symbolic weight. Time, like waste, was something that flowed and could not be stopped. The emperor delighted in explaining this metaphor to guests, though many suspected it was simply a convenient way to limit audiences. A foreign princess, visiting to arrange a marriage alliance, insisted on meeting the emperor in his main audience hall. He agreed, but the next morning, she was summoned to the privy chamber instead. Rather than be offended, she laughed and remarked that in her country, rulers often met in bathhouses. The emperor, charmed by her composure, agreed to the alliance. Their descendants would later tell this story as proof that diplomacy often depends on unexpected grace. The Council of Rain. One spring, heavy rains made much of the palace damp and chilly. The emperor decided to hold his council in the privy chamber, where a cleverly designed heating system kept the air warm. Ministers huddled gratefully inside, sipping hot wine as they discussed policy. The chamber's reputation shifted slightly after that, from a place of oddity to a refuge from the miserable weather outside. The painter's challenge. A court painter once asked permission to paint the emperor at work. He expected to depict him in royal robes, seated on a golden throne. Instead, he was told to set up his easel in the privy chamber. The resulting portrait was remarkable. The emperor, serene and regal, despite the humble setting, surrounded by incense smoke and marble mosaics. Far from being hidden away, the painting was displayed in the palace gallery, a reminder that this was where true power flowed. The final audience. The emperor's final audience was held, as always, in the privy chamber. Too weak to rise from his throne, he listened to petitions, gave instructions, and signed decrees until late into the night. Those present later said the room felt timeless, as if the rituals of his reign could go on forever. When he passed away days later, the chamber was sealed. It was never used again, left exactly as it had been, a strange, intimate monument to a ruler who chose to rule from the most unlikely of seats. And so, our strange journey through the world of an emperor, his throne, and the things he chose to do with it, comes to a quiet close. We've wandered through palaces, peered into private chambers, and, perhaps, seen more of royal bathroom habits than we ever thought we would. History is often dressed in gold and silk, but behind the curtains, there are always the odd, the unexpected, and the downright absurd. That's the part I like to share with you. If you've enjoyed this slow dive into the strange corners of the past, you might want to subscribe. It's free, and it means you won't miss the next time we go rummaging through the dustiest, weirdest pages of history. You can even leave a comment, perhaps tell me which chapter made you raise your eyebrows the highest, or, if you dare, which one made you laugh. And, of course, you can share this video with someone who needs to know that even emperors had very questionable interior design choices. Make sure to like and subscribe for more videos. Sleep well, dream of history, and remember, the past is never as clean as the textbooks make it seem. Good night.